less education, those with compulsory school or vocational education, and especially those with higher education, along higher education, improve their skills. And we could also see that in PIAC, that a large part of the increase in skills in Denmark are related to a higher level of education, and those who take a long education, long further education, especially them who have an increase in skills. Yeah, and then at last, if you look at the development with skills divided by the health status at age 28 to 30, we can see that those young people who have a poor health in the late 20s also have a less positive development in skills than those who have a better health. So health is also related to this development skill. And of course, if we want to look more into it, we haven't done that in that way. All these factors, education, health, employment, gender, immigrant, are related, so it's a bit complex, of course. Yes. And then I just want to, before I say thank you for listening, I think it's very useful to have this panel data with more than one skill measures, like we have here, and we would like to have more of it. Yes.
We would like more countries to do this kind of things. So this is a call to all the PIAC participants. And thank you so much, Vibeke, for your talk. Now, I would like to move into the panel part of this session. So I would like to invite David, Øssur, Lucia, Anne to join us on stage.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, I would like to also thank technology for my glasses that are what allows me to read over there and over here. In a sense, back in the past, at the time of Plato, people didn't necessarily read. A, because it was expensive to produce books, and second, because they couldn't see. So there were other people, young people, that would read for you. That's how it worked. So thank you so much. I will introduce our panel members. First of all, I would like to introduce Øssur, Kalsø Hansen, who is the Deputy Director of the National Agency for Education and Quality in Denmark. We then have David Hughes, who is the Chief Executive at the Association of Colleges in the United Kingdom. Then we have Anne Branch, who is the Head of Union of Skills at the European Commission in the DG Employment. And Lucia Dellagnelo, who is the Deputy Director at the OECD Directorate for Education and Skills, and you have already familiarized yourselves with Anne and Lucia from yesterday's session. Now, I would like to start with Øssur, Denmark. People often say, well, we need evidence-based policy making, but you don't just go in a supermarket and order a kilo of evidence. You need to invest in making up that evidence, and the PISA-PIAC link is fantastic. You have done it twice. At the same time, it's a significant investment, both political and financial, I guess. So what convinced Denmark to do this, and what specific policy questions you thought you would be able to answer this data?
Yeah, thank you. And, sorry. Can you hear me now? Yeah, all right. Well, first and foremost, I would like to thank Vibeke for her great work. I think this we use this a lot in the Danish government when we plan politics, when we plan the implementation of educational guidelines, and I hope it also gave some of you a little bit of insight and inspiration. And then I would add that in the Danish society, we do have a lot of good data on a lot of things. Probably a lot of it related to our strong social security numbers tradition, that we have a lot of data on different things that we can combine. But some of the data that we don't have is this about the foundational skills for young people. So this is actually, this fills in a void that we have right now. So in that sense, it's a very obvious area to explore more. And some of the things that we really wanted to learn about this is, basically, so to follow the skill foundation for young people. We want to understand the different pathways that our young people have into the for different groups of students, how their skill sets increase and develop. We want to see the mobility in skill development. We want to follow this for different groups, but also, of course, how this affects their opportunities as they grow. But it also gives us some insights into who and why. Some struggle in the transition into either education or the labor market, so that's also very useful. So I think to us, it's not just a research exercise. I think in many ways this is we need evidence-based politics. We like that, and this is definitely the foundation for that. And I think also we can say that in Denmark we have a very diverse educational system with 4 different upper secondary tracks. We have more than 100 vocational educations. So I think this proves that this is important to have a variety of offers for the young people, because they do come in with different skill sets, and we need to train them all the way. So.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Now I would like to shift the perspective a little from what happens at the more system level to what happens more on the ground, and I'll bring David here. The OECD, in a sense, tells a nice story. The UK is doing actually quite well, and I guess I'm an OECD person, so I never get happy with happy stories. So I will ask you, do you think this is because there is a genuine good story? Are we measuring what counts and you do well? Or are we failing to measure what counts in which you would actually maybe not do so well?
Oh, it's a really good question. And the Danish example is a really good example of what we don't do in the UK. But I mean, look, PIAC and PISA, I think, have shone a really important light on the problems in most OECD countries between one group and another group, the polarization, the group who do well and the group who don't do well. In the UK, it has concentrated policymakers and ministers' minds on doing more to improve, so they like the league table approach. I think the problem with league tables is it's a bit like squeezing a toothpaste, thing, where you're squeezing the toothpaste thing as much as you can to get as much out of it as possible. And then you find there's none left, right? And it's a bit like that with PISA and PIAC. We do okay in the numbers, but the big group of people who don't do okay miss out time and time again. And the policy solutions are always to do more of what we do and to do more of what we do better. So they say if we just get better at education at age 5 and at age 12 and at age 16 and 18, everyone will be better. I just don't believe that's true. I think what PIAC doesn't measure is how, for a big group of people, the education system is just not working. Right? So you can get much better at education, but you will miss a sizable minority of people who are just not motivated, turned on, engaged, working in it. So we end up with this strange world where PIAC helps us do a bit better with what we've got, but it stops us from looking at the group who are being left behind. And what we always do is just, in a sense, put the pressure on them to do better in a system that doesn't work for them. So I think we need to learn more about why it doesn't work and what the problems are for lots of people to engage, as well as do better with the system we've got.
Fantastic, thank you, David. Now I'll go to Anne. In a sense, David has talked to us about what success or lack of success may actually look like. And that takes us a little bit to the EU level, in the sense that the Union of Skills and the new focus on basic skills, you talked yesterday about basic not because they're basic, but because they are the foundation upon which we build everything else. The Commission is setting stronger ambitions for skills across Europe. How do you see evidence from PIAC feeding into this agenda, particularly in connecting education and employment policies?
Thank you. So, indeed, perhaps first of all, a bit of a zooming in strategically into the importance on skills now in the EU's policies. And just to recall that there's skills are really top of the political agenda. So the Union of Skills was adopted in March this year. It's our new strategy. But symbolically, it came within the first 100 days, because there is this realization that skills are so important to our competitiveness, to our resilience, to the green and digital transitions, and nothing gets done if we don't have the people to actually implement our policies. So this is really important. And there was also, I think, we talked a little bit about the education domain and the employment domain, and this is in the question here. But I would say we also are looking at this broader. So the reason skills were in the first 100 days of the Commission's agenda is because it's relevant to every policy, every sectoral policy now. And so since the Union of Skills was adopted, we looked at all the policy initiatives coming out of the Commission since then, and I think we counted at least 25 have chapters on skills. So this is, I think, a really important element to have in mind. And of course, here in a lot of these documents, we're looking at workers, the adult population. And the reality is that when people leave formal education with extended working lives and older retirement ages, people will be in the labor force sometimes for as much as 4 decades. And we see the pace of change. This means that everyone is going to be concerned by upskilling, all adults, whereas it used to be perhaps not the case for the unlucky few in the past, but now the paradigm has changed. So this adult population is extremely important. So now what PIAC, obviously, in a sense it tells us something intuitive, but the evidence is really important, is that we see that if people are burdened in adulthood by low basic skills if they didn't get them earlier on. And so obviously PISA was super useful, but PIAC coming along, it's been really useful to help us put our finger on the fact that, hold on, this is really serious, because this scars people for their entire lives. So it's been very important from that point of view. And so therefore we have tried to come with solutions. I mean, it is skills and education, it's primarily a national competence, but we've tried to come with initiatives that can help push developments on the ground at the national level. And I would say that the Union of Skills, finally, just for this point, it is very much a holistic approach. It's a lifelong approach, and it very much starts with education at the school level through to upskilling of adults, and so it's really trying to bring these different worlds and sectors together. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, Lucia, from looking across OECD countries, what are the big messages from PIAC? We have heard a lot of PIAC-related big messages, but more specifically related to transition from education and the labor market. And I imagine you meet a lot of ministers in your role in the OECD. What are the 2 or 3 points that you really want them to hear coming from this evidence?
Thanks, Francesca. I think the first point is that really when you look at the... Now it's on. Thank you. When you look at the PIAC data, the levels of literacy and reading skills at the beginning at 16 are very low. And what it means is that people are leaving school, almost 12 years in school, without acquiring the reading skills that they are supposed to be acquiring. So the first message for ministers is that make schooling right. Make sure that people acquire the necessary, the foundational skills while at school, because we can see from PIAC data that the gap widens. And it widens differently for people with a high level of skills and low levels of skills and socioeconomic status and family background. So I think I always tell ministers that, you know, we are wasting a lot of time and money, but by not having a good education in the foundational years, that children and young people are at school. And this discussion 20 years ago was about educational attainment, years of educational attainment. That was more or less our correlation for skills. But PIAC data show that almost 82% of adults in OECD countries have attained good levels of education, but have not developed the skills, the basic skills. 25% of them are in the very low level of skill acquisition they're supposed to do. So that's the first thing to minister, the first message. And the second one is that we really don't have a lot of information about the transition between school and work. And I think we should look with different lenses for different groups. When we have average, we miss a lot of people or people with different characteristics. So, and we at OECD and ministers and education systems should look more carefully about the transition period from school to understand what are the barriers, what are the obstacles that young people face.
Thank you. Now, David, Lucia talked and finished with the word obstacles. What do you think are some of the key barriers that individuals face, financial, cultural? What is leaving people behind during transitions?
Well, I think actually there are different layers of barrier. I think the first one is a barrier of confidence and belief, and a psychological barrier. You know, so after 12 years of formal education, certainly in the UK, lots of young people come out not seeing themselves as learners, not believing that they can learn, not believing that they can benefit from getting involved in learning. I mean, and all of the surveys show that. If you look at, in the UK, there's an annual survey of 6,000 people asking about attitudes to learning. And every year it shows a polarization. So people who left education after a degree, 80% think they will carry on learning in the next 12 months. It's a bit like reading. If you left school as an education at 16, only 20% believe that they'll carry on any learning in the next 12 months. That massive divide. So it's not about money in the first instance or time. I think it's about motivation, it's about belief, it's about confidence. And we did a really short survey about a month ago on the impact of AI, technology and green skills, about 2,000 adults. And again, the polarization was people who had degrees said, yeah, I'm really worried about AI, green skills. I think I need to think about training. People who left school at 16, no, it's not a problem, not a problem. And the reality is, for that group, they'll be the ones who get left behind. So, and the barrier isn't, therefore, that they're looking for training and they haven't got the money or the time. It's because they're not even looking. And therefore, we've got a problem in the education system to engage more, to give people the confidence as learners, so they come out with those cognitive and metacognitive skills that we know, in a sense, everyone in this audience has. We all turned up today coming because we thought we'd learn something, and we thought that's pretty good, actually. For, you know, Friday in Madrid, yeah, I'll go and learn something. There's more people outside who wouldn't dare walk in the room because they don't want to learn, because they would think they would be exposed, they think they won't be able to access it, they're frightened of it, or they don't even see the point.
I would like to continue on this issue of some of the barriers and, in a sense, what can be done about this. So, Øssur, turning to you now, what do you think are some approaches, whether, I don't know, through companies, social partners, community providers, that actually may be able to solve the issue and bring people into learning after they have completed school?
Yeah, so first, I think I'll mention that, I mean, Elaine was so nice to point out that Denmark has actually increased in this PIAAC assessment, but I think it's important to say that what we see in Denmark is it's actually the skilled readers who have raised their levels, but the low readers have not. So we see this issue in Denmark as well. So and also, it is also adults with low skills that take least part in adult learning. So we do see these issues as well. And I mean, and we can, I mean, theorize, or at least in Denmark, we theorize about what are the barriers. There might be some practical barriers. There might be some, past negative experience. We don't actually know too much about that right now. But what we do know is that, and what we see, especially from the PIAAC results, is that learning has to be integrated into everyday life. It has to be part of also in the workplace. So it's not only about the formal education that you get. It's basically lifelong learning. We have to kind of integrate it into your work life also. And I think one of the things that we've done in Denmark is that just 2 years ago, there was a big political agreement with all the partners of the labor market, so the government, but also both the employers and the employees, who agreed on a deal saying that we will introduce screening but not for all people, but actually within companies. So we'll do some tests on that to see how do these read and writing, how do these skills, how do they follow with the educational office. We also, as part of that, we actually want to try to map out these different barriers. So what are the different barriers for both providers, learners, and companies? So I think what we are at least discussing a lot in Denmark is this. So we need to include education also in the work life. So we move away from the individual taking a choice of, yes, I want to learn something, but also saying that, well, if you want to be part of this company, we actually want you to learn something. So that's at least one of the steps that we've taken.
That's great. Now, Lucia, Vibeke showed us some of the groups that are at risk of poor transitions based on data from Denmark. But the OECD has done a lot of work on transitions. And in particular, what are some of the groups, whether by gender, whether by socioeconomic background, migration status, and etc., that are at a high risk of having poor transitions. So can you elaborate on that and actually tell us about some of the policies that can be put in place that target support, but at the same time do not stigmatize people? There's always that risk. We want to help those at risk, but let's not stigmatize groups.
Francesca is always give me the most difficult questions to respond. But I think it's important, of course, at OECD we have this identification of some variables that are related to more risk in terms of acquiring skills and educational attainment, such as gender, socioeconomic background. I think for me it's really, every time that I read that in our reports, I find it really worrying and concerning that if you have at least one parent with higher education, your chances of developing more skills, of having more educational attainment go very high. And it has to do also with motivation, what we were talking about. If you are born into a family that one or your mother or your father has gone to university, there are expectations, and they start creating this culture of more education is important for your life, for later, for your employment chances. So what I wanted to just to highlight that although we have information about these variables that create barriers for skill acquisition and education attainment, we have to be very nuanced about how they play out in different contexts. Across OECD countries, there are many countries that, for example, Costa Rica, Thailand, not yet, but will be, Australia, Japan, that have very different cultures, and where this, for example, gender, you mentioned, in Denmark, there is not, or in Sweden, in Finland, gender is not a big issue, but for some countries, gender is really a big issue, and you have to understand how this plays out. So what I would say, and nowadays disability, it's a big issue and really hard to get data because of neurodiversity. For example, some countries have high levels of labels in children from very early on, and then they count as disadvantaged because they have a disability. Some other countries don't do any early diagnosis, so you don't count, but that child needs special attention or has special learning needs. So it's becoming more and more complicated, and I think it's very important to consider the cultural norms and the general context of different countries in order to identify these groups. Again, immigration background, it's an obstacle, it will put you. But if you are an immigrant family with high level of education in a new country, it actually can be an advantage because you have a different language. And so I think we need data, but we need also this critical analysis of how these data or how these variables really play out in different contexts to identify the real needs of students and young people, both at schools and at the job market.
I must say, I keep asking hard questions to Lucia because she answers so well. So I want to, that's part of the game. Now, the Union of Skills and the broader EU agenda set explicit ambitions in terms of increasing adult participation because it's a path to better skills, particularly for low qualified adults and those who are outside of employment. How do you see concrete tools like the individual learning accounts or the skill guarantee being used to actually support those groups?
Okay, thank you for the question. So perhaps, first of all, a quick word on our targets and then on some of our support measures. So indeed, the EU has set an ambitious adult learning target. It's for 60% of adults to take part in learning every year by 2030. And it's actually one of 3 EU headline targets to implement the European Pillar on Social Rights. And these 3 targets were endorsed by member states and the Council, so it's a serious political target. And unfortunately, right now, the data we have shows that less than 40% of adults across Europe are taking part in learning every year. So there's still a lot of work to do to reach the target. Then also when it comes to basic digital skills, the EU has a target of 80% of adults having basic digital skills by 2030. And we see from data in 2023 that only 55.6% of adults had at least basic digital skills, which we all know is now a key requirement for taking part in the labour market and being able to keep up with the speed of new technologies. And then we see, of course, that the levels of participation and basic skills are even lower for the low-educated adults and those who aren't in employment. Perhaps and also another element, not specifically related to the low-skilled, is that we also know that people in larger companies are more likely to get training. So this is, I think, also another important element behind our work. So over the years, we've proposed various initiatives to try to do something about this. Perhaps one of our most recent ones under the Union of Skills and the Basic Skills Action Plan, which accompanies it, is around, we want to try and work with member states to promote innovative community learning spaces. So this is really targeting the low-skilled, and it picks up on this issue of, like David mentioned, the psychological barriers and the low motivation of adults to take part in training, because in some countries the money is there, the support measures are there, but we cannot get the people through the door, through the threshold. And I think one thing we conclude is that there are some people are so scarred by their early education in a more formal setting that they've just shut themselves down. This happens in other fields as well. I used to work with microfinance, and there's some communities, you need to go to those communities to reach out. They may be very entrepreneurial, but they are not going to go into an institution. So I think here we want to try and share experience across Europe of different schemes that exist already. It's something to be done at the national level, but we think we're not going to shift the dial unless we really move into more creative thinking about how to reach these people, whether it's libraries, sports centres, whatever, mobile caravans that go to communities. So that's one important measure that we launched now. Secondly, I'd mentioned, so the individual learning accounts you mentioned. So this was something we proposed in 2022, and there's a council recommendation. So member states took up our proposal and agreed to implement individual learning accounts or equivalents. And basically the idea is very simple. The starting point is that we're in a world where everyone will have to change occupation, career sector, perhaps numerous times in their lives, and that people need to be empowered to take charge of their own training beyond what their employer may provide. So employers will tend to give you training that's useful for them, which is obviously good, but in the new world where people will also need to be empowered to train to change professions if they wish. So the idea is to give people an individual account money. So France was a pioneer in this. And then they decide what they want to spend it on. Of course, there's a registry of courses which are labour market relevant. One has to be careful around fraud and things like that. And there's also, the idea is also to give people skills assessments, career guidance, and to put in place like a range of enabling conditions so that people are helped on this path. So at the moment, we're helping about half of member states with EU funding, for example, to pilot schemes like this. And as I said, France has a very well-established scheme, which is quite interesting. So there is also the idea there that one would give special support for people who are disadvantaged, and that can cover low basic skills. We also had an initiative back in 2016. This was a recommendation to member states on upskilling pathways, where it was really targeting the low qualified, and it was saying that countries should put in place skills assessment, tailored learning offer, and a validation of skills explicitly targeting those most in need. It's still valid. It was evaluated a couple of years ago, and the findings were that the recommendation is valid, but we were disappointed at the level of implementation at the national level. So there really needs to be, countries really do need to step up their efforts with regard to the low-skilled. But then we also have other initiatives which are tackling more adults in employment. So maybe I need to stay short on those, because as Øssur said, a lot of training happens in workplaces. So, for example, we've launched a new pilot for a skills guarantee. The idea here is to try to help people, to facilitate job transitions for workers in declining sectors and occupations to transition into kind of growing strategic sectors. And then we also have initiatives to try to encourage public-private partnerships because it is a shared responsibility. So the Pact for Skills, we try to encourage employers to really up their upskilling commitments and to work together to develop, identify what are the new occupations of the future, to do skills intelligence around that, and to also start to prepare curricula that can be shared across Europe for those jobs. I'll stop there.
Fantastic. Now, I will continue with a little bit of scientific jargon here. So after the da and the nye, I would like now to ask Vibeke, what was the ha-ha? Like when you actually started analyzing the PISA-PIAC link and you saw some of the findings, what was like, wow, this is great, cool, ha-ha. What was that? And what did you wish actually was better understood by policymakers? So what is of the work that you have still done? And we'll put little things on Øssur's ears for not having listened enough yet. But what is that you wish was better reflected in policymaking?
Yeah, it's difficult this bit, what was surprising me, because often you have some expectation and often you confirm your expectations. Yeah, but it's also sad sometimes because, so of course, one thing I think would be good to have an increased focus on in policy and in the educational system and also in the employment services is what has been mentioned here also. We can see a relationship between health problems and skills. And we also see in other studies that those with disability have problems in the educational system and so on. And I think it could be nice to be better in the school systems and the education system to handle those who have other. It's not just a problem if they want to learn or not want to learn. They have some other problems that is a barrier for learning. For example, if you have mental health problems or something. And I think it could be nice if that was also discussed a bit more and also analyzed a bit more in relations between skills, and we can do that in PIAC also, and that could be nice. But I've just think that a lot of those young people who have problems in school also have other problems, and how can we handle that?
Now, I would like to open the floor for questions to see if anyone has the will, the energy to ask hard questions or easier questions. In the PIAC tradition, you want a little bit of both. We see someone in the back.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the presentation. I come from a Spanish foundation. We are doing research in green skills, among other things. And I was wondering to what level you are working very much in the green skills at basic level, especially, for instance, in the case of Denmark, in the study, if you could go further in this direction, or maybe it's something that you are going in the future. Thank you very much.
So could you maybe repeat the essence of the question? Sorry.
Can you repeat the essence of the question?
Is that to what extent are you doing research on PIAC in green basic skills?
Okay.
Green. The green transition. Thank you.
Green basic skills in PIAC. You can also say we're not doing that. Yeah. That's a legitimate answer.
I don't know. Yeah.
Not yet. Not yet.
They don't do any.
Last panel of today. This is an invitation to remain up to the end.
Very interesting panel, thank you. Question to David. You were talking a lot about how the UK is trying to do more of the same. You're obviously representing colleges, which provide formal but also non-formal learning opportunities. Are you actually doing something different, or are you just proposing more of the same as well?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think, look, I think we know what works in adult education, and it's about engaging people in something that is important to them. And there are lots of points in people's lives where that works. So, you know, I've done a lot in prison education, which ironically is a fantastic place for adults to get involved for the first time, to be treated as a learner, not as a prisoner, and to try and change their lives. When young women have children, when people reach significant birthdays, 40, 50 maybe, you know, when people are in with an employer who is restructuring and is saying, actually, you're now at risk of redundancy. There are lots of points where you can really capture people, and the essence of it, I think, is to flip it from being frightened and scared into having agency and being empowered. You know, the best story I've ever had was introducing a woman who was a museum curator, and she started her learning journey doing belly dancing on a white working class estate just outside Brighton on the south coast. And she told her story about, she grew up with 3 kids, single parent, left school at 16, had no formal education, no formal qualifications, and someone said, "Oh, come on, let's do this belly dancing class." She got into the belly dancing class. It was run by the university, and the university were using it to suck people in and to kind of make people feel like they could learn. And as soon as she started, whoa, she just flew. And and we see that time and time again. The problem, I think, is that policymakers generally try to determine what's important to learn. So we kind of say it's these skills and those skills and these skills. And that's a million miles from where people are. So you have to bridge. You have to kind of have an easy, nice bridge. You know, dads with their kids, you know, just building a bird box or something, you know. You put them in a classroom, you get them learning, you get them talking to each other. You know, parents reading to their children. You know, lots of parents can't read out loud very well. If you help them do that, they suddenly kind of go, bloody hell, I've learned something, you know. And then the final thing I'd say is there's a really important peer-to-peer thing here. We had a fantastic scheme in the UK that the previous government stopped funding, which was called the Union Learning Fund. And it had union members, trade union members, who would say to their co-worker, do you want to get involved? And we'll help you get into learning. To overcome those barriers, those kind of, that it's not for me. And it's not the employer telling you to learn, because that can be quite confrontational. But it's one of my co-workers saying, you could do something here and you could really benefit. So I think that we need more of that, give agency to people, let them have some power about what they learn. And then they'll find the thing that works for them and trust them to do that, rather than impose from the top a whole set of skills that are determined, you know. And sorry, final thing. If you talk to most employers, what they ask for is not all of those formal skills in qualifications and, you know, and so on. They ask for all the stuff about, we know, don't we, about communication and team working and analytical skills and so on. None of that gets determined in the qualifications in the UK. It's all outside of it.
We have 2 mics for 2 questions.
I do have a scientific question for you. I was wondering, so your results are basically the rich get richer, and you know. But I was wondering, in your graph in the beginning, you showed that some people go from less well to better, and others go down. And I was wondering if those are the buttons that can be, you know, what are the moderators in your research? So who are the ones who go from not such a good reader to a good reader? What did they do? Are they reading more books? Are they more digitally active? You never know.
That's a good question, and we haven't looked into that.
But you can, right?
Yeah, we have it in PISA, for example.
It is in
and
the
we
data.
also have skill use in PIAC. Yes, we can see that those who use IT at work are having a better development. But we haven't looked so much into that.
But because that's where you get the aha from, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, there's lots more to do.
Hello, Gilad from the Israel Democracy Institute. A question to the EU representative. I was happy to learn about the skills guarantee. I was wondering, as I understand, it's adding to the policy mix. It's not replacing something you think doesn't work. So how do you see the relation between the skills guarantee and let's say the ILA, or the more wide net of the previous policies? Is it the skills guarantee for those who will definitely need to change their jobs, while the previous policies were for people just updating their skills, or something else?
Well, thank you for the question. So it's definitely complementing other measures before, and it's trying to come into a new space. So, for example, it's really trying to target people already in work. So before avoid them becoming unemployed, because long-term unemployment is very scarring. People lose a lot of confidence. And the EU already has quite a lot of labour market activation measures for the unemployed and long-term unemployed. So here, like observing the pace of change, the green and digital transitions, that some sectors and jobs will disappear because of this, yet others need more workers. We heard about the wind sector yesterday and renewable energies. Well, a lot of these skills, I think one of the things we've seen in some of the kind of exploration, research and policy discussions on green skills in recent years has been that quite a lot of what we call green skills are actually generic technical skills that are then applied to a particular, whether it's in wind turbine blades or installing solar panels. I mean, not only, but so a lot of vocational education and training profiles are actually very relevant. And so there's a lot of potential transferability of people between sectors, we think. But we think the kind of matching mechanisms are missing. So the idea would be, so it's a pilot, and it's testing different delivery mechanisms. And the idea would then be to roll it out in the future EU funding period, where there's a new European Competitiveness Fund. So the idea is really to see how to help people to change from declining job sectors to growing ones, make sure they get upskilling along the way. And so it's a new thing. The individual learning accounts, it's a kind of a systemic change, trying to empower everyone, give everybody the right to have more agency, the word David used, give them more agency over their training, so independent of their employers, so that if they need to change professions, they have more choice, and just to give them more agency. And then we have, as I say, we have different levels of measures. The Pact for Skills is more about trying to leverage those public-private partnerships to engage employers, because you know the responsibility is public and private, it's with individuals. So to try to leverage employers. and I could go on, but we have other measures too, and each time I would say they're targeting a niche. So I hope that explains it.
Other questions? Otherwise, I mean, since it's a festive season, let's imagine that I'm Father Christmas, and I give you, each of you, one present. You can have an ask in terms of improving people's lives and transitions from education into employment. In 1 minute, however, so your time is short, in 1 minute, what would be your present that you're asking Father Christmas at this panel, not this Christmas? You can still get your real presents.
Okay.
So I think one of the things that we discussed in preparation for this is that, I mean, if we are to add some data into this, the PIAC assessment, we discussed that having more information about the social and emotional skills could actually be relevant. I think this, it's a little bit what the question before related to, that in an ever-changing work atmosphere, labor market, we think that adapting to new job profiles is extremely important. And even though, of course, literacy and numeracy is extremely important, we don't think that they paint the full picture. So adding these social emotional skills would probably complete, or at least add to the complete picture. So I think asking for something for Christmas, that could be one thing.
I'm tempted to say, can we rejoin the EU and do it? But that might be too political. Yes.
And can make it happen.
Yeah, it would be very nice. Yeah, sorry, I've forgotten what I was going to say now. No, I think as well as the social emotional skills, I think we need to put into education at every stage learning skills. The skill to learn, which all of us have in this room, we take for granted, but actually you can learn it. You can learn to learn. And I think that, you know, we kind of, our system, certainly in the UK, drives that kind of thirst for learning in every child. It drives it away, it drives it out of people. And I think someone said they lock it up, you know, they do. They lock up that, we've got to unlock that learning kind of urge that we all have. And I think the education system, if it could do one thing, is to help everyone leave education as a learner, and that will set them up for life.
Yes, perhaps I can have a very expensive gift. Because I think it could be nice if you have more panel data and also more countries. For example, the countries that are similar to Denmark, you could compare the piece of PIAC data. That could be very fun. Yeah.
For me, my most expensive but most effective present would be to make education really a lever for closing the gap between the socioeconomic and different and other differences that make children, and the gap really starts when they are born and widens throughout life. I think education could be and should be the great reducer, the great leveling of the playing field, so every person has a good chance in life.
And for me, it would be for there to be real dynamism to happen. There's a lot of institutional inertia when it comes to the kind of institutional world, but the world is changing so fast. We need all the kind of countries and people in them, to governments and the systems and everyone, to realize the pace of change is so fast. We've got to get quicker at adapting to it. And I would really welcome a push by member states to really reach out to these populations that are scarred by their former experience, and to really realize this is a massive problem, and we've just got to do more creatively, innovative ways to reach them, to bring them to training, and then to put in place this kind of individual learning accounts to empower people to have some agency over their training, accompanied by some training leave, because the issue of time, which came up as well, motivation and time, and many countries have paid training leave, but I would have said that those things would have been my wish for Santa.
A wise man at the OECD always says we should evaluate not the cost just of implementing policy reforms, but actually evaluating the cost of inaction. So it is expensive, but it's more expensive not to do anything. And with these wise words, I would like to actually thank my panel. My wish for Christmas was that this panel would end in time, and it did. And in fact, we have a fantastic coffee break that is waiting for us. So with this, I would like to thank Øssur, David, Vibeke, Lucia, and Anne for their great panel, and wish you a great continuation.